A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I never thought sharing a house with 3 other people would lead to such a mess of feelings and moral questions, but here we are.
I, a 30-year-old graphic designer, moved in with 2 friends and 1 boyfriend who somehow became part of this tight living situation.
Let's call them Sarah, Tom, and Lucas. The dynamic worked most of the time, but when Lucas started getting comfy, I felt a shift. I'd catch him lounging on the couch, flicking through channels and eating our snacks. Sure, he was with Sarah, but it was like the boundaries began to blur between friendship and just having a roommate with coupled privileges. A week ago, Lucas asked if he could borrow my car to go to a job interview he'd been prepping for. Now, usually, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I want the guy to succeed. But I'd just spent a fortune on car repairs because my last borrower didn't think a simple flat tire needed more than a can of Fix-A-Flat. I hesitated, feeling the familiar weight of conflict bearing down on me. Look, I can give you my bike, and it's only a couple of miles to the office, I suggested, trying to be reasonable. He laughed, like I was joking, but my frustration brewed. I didn't think it was fair to risk my car after everything I'd recently put into it. I told him no. The tension in the air was thick as he mulled over my refusal. I could see him processing, disappointment washing over his face, but I held my ground. The day of the interview came, and the moment I stepped out to grab coffee, I saw him pacing in the living room, barely able to contain his anxiety. "Can I at least use the bike?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. My stomach churned. I felt guilty, knowing how badly he wanted this job, but deep down, I knew I couldn't let another person risk my livelihood for a short-term solution to a long-standing worry. "I really can't, Lucas," I replied softly, and I could see the energy in the room dim. When he called me hours later to tell me he missed the interview because he couldn't get there without my car, I felt both relief and guilt. Relief that my choice to protect my property had come without troublesome consequences, at least on my end, but guilt because I could practically hear the resignation in his voice. I spent the rest of the day questioning if I was an asshole for prioritizing my car over someone else's future. Should I have been more understanding? As I sat there in a quiet house that night, I realized that life in this house wasn't going to get any clearer, and maybe that was okay. We were all in this nebulous state of budding adulthood, trying to navigate friendships, relationships, and responsibilities. A few days later, Lucas came home and announced he found another interview opportunity, this time without the expectation of using my car. I smiled for him, but it didn't erase the bittersweet taste of how our previous encounter had shaped things. There were a million small choices that made this life complicated, and sometimes, it seemed, the hardest ones were the ones nobody saw. So, maybe I wasn't the asshole. Maybe I just was someone trying to protect what little I had while hoping everyone else found their way in this messy, expectedly chaotic era of life. As the days blurred into weeks, I watched Lucas navigate the hectic world of job hunting, his determination sometimes leaving me in awe. I'd casually ask him how his applications were going while simultaneously trying to not overstep my boundaries as a roommate. He often consulting his girlfriend, Jess, about the roles he was interested in, their excitement filling the apartment whenever he'd get a call for a phone interview. I couldn't blame him, either. They were young, filled with dreams, and yet, the bitterness from our previous encounter still festered in the background of my mind. I kept replaying that day, the heated exchange, the way my resolve had crumbled as I struggled to stand my ground. Was I selfish for wanting to keep my car safe from wear and tear? For wanting to create a buffer between my possessions and the unpredictable chaos of other people's lives? I found myself wrestling with a kind of guilt that felt inexplicably heavy. It wasn't until one late afternoon, after a grueling day at work engulfed in stress, that it all boiled over again. Jess came home in tears, her mascara smudged, voice cracking as she revealed Lucas hadn't gotten the job he'd pinned all his hopes on. It echoed in the hallway, and my heart sank. I could see Jess's heart shattering, and for a moment, I felt a pang of disdain towards myself. What did I even know about other people's struggles? Day after day, I had cautiously guarded my little world, but at what cost? I was a fortress, standing firm against the emotional weathering of others, and yet, here was proof that sometimes that weather could be brutal. I offered my usual platitudes, "I'm sure something else will come up, and it's not the end of the world," while inwardly questioning if I should have been more supportive. Jess, grabbing a handful of napkins and wiping her tears, looked at me like she was inching closer to needing someone to blame. That flicker in her eyes felt unmistakable, a subtle accusation hiding behind the sorrow. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs as I tried to quell the rising tide of emotions. I know this is hard, but Lucas gave it his all, I finally said, my heart racing as I dared to speak. Jess nodded, managing a half-hearted smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. After she had left to meet Lucas for a pep talk, I sank into the sofa, feeling the weight of my decisions again. It hit me like a freight train. I had made my choices, but it wasn't Lucas or Jess who'd pushed me into this position. I was stuck in that gray space between self-preservation and the need to support friends. Would I always feel like this? The next couple of days were filled with the gentle reminder of life moving forward, despite my tumultuous thoughts. Lucas stayed mostly quiet after his setback, and I wondered if my reluctance to share my car had carved a distance between us that felt harsh and unyielding. Would things have been different if I'd just let him borrow it? Would he have felt less like he was trying to walk a tightrope? As I wrestled with these thoughts, I finally gathered enough courage one evening. "Hey, Lucas," I said, my voice hesitant as he sat at the dining table sifting through job listings, his brows knitted in concentration. "I've been thinking about the car. If you really need it for the next interview, you can use it." He looked up, surprise mingling with gratitude on his face. "Really? Are you sure?" I nodded, both relieved and terrified, feeling an almost physical ache in my gut. "Yeah, I trust you." After a long, pregnant pause, he smiled, a genuine light sparking in his eyes again. "Thanks. I'll be careful, I promise." And just like that, with a simple act, a layer of tension lifted from the apartment. It was as if we had both taken a step forward, not just him, but me too. We had to navigate this chaotic time together, reminding ourselves that sometimes you have to release control to create space for others. I had to let go of the guilt and the fear that I was doing everything wrong. Life, I realized, was messy and unpredictable, but maybe that's what made it worth living. Moments turned to memories, and sometimes, being a little vulnerable along the way was the best way to build the connections that mattered most. I hoped that this new chapter would see us become more than just tenants sharing a roof. Perhaps we could spark a friendship that stood stronger than the steel and rubber of any car. As Lucas prepared for the interview, I hugged the thought of growth tightly, and for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of optimism about navigating this messy era that stretched before us. A week passed, and the tension in our apartment began to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. Lucas was more upbeat, a bounce in his step that I hadn't seen before. He'd opened up about his experiences in getting to know the companies he was applying to, the kind of exciting roles he envisioned for himself, and I found myself rooting for him, hoping he would land something that truly excited him. There was an early morning when we found ourselves sharing coffee in our mismatched mugs, his chipped blue one, a gift from his mom, and my plain white one. We laughed about the terrible dinners we'd relied on during our school days, the microwavable mac and cheese that tasted like cardboard, and the countless times we learned that cooking was a science best left to someone else. "I seriously thought I'd never get through that phase without burning myself," he chuckled, leaning back in his chair as the sunlight streamed through our tiny kitchen window. And just like that, we were trading stories, our laughter bouncing off the walls where silence had lingered too long. It was refreshing, and I thought to myself, this is how you build friendships, brick by brick, shared moments by shared moments. Then the call came. I was in my room, trying to focus on laundry when Lucas burst through my door, an energy that surged through him so contagious I couldn't help but grin. "I got it," he exclaimed, holding his phone triumphantly aloft like a victory flag. My heart swelled as I registered the joy in his eyes. He was excited about starting this new chapter, and by extension, so was I. There was something undeniably uplifting about watching someone else chase their dreams. But as he filled the space around us with excitement, I felt an all too familiar wave of doubt wash over me. I wondered if I had done enough to support him. Should I have lent him my car despite my hesitations? What if he had shown me just a bit more appreciation? I was conflicted. Supporting your friends feels like a slippery slope sometimes, and I had been trying so hard to put myself first. Later that evening, I sat alone on our balcony, staring at the city lights that twinkled like stars against the velvet night sky. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the open door while the hum of laughter faintly echoed from inside. Lucas was celebrating with our other roommate, Maria, who had baked a cake for the occasion, chocolate, of course, his favorite. As I listened to their joyous banter, I felt a pang of loneliness creep in. The moment felt profound, a celebration of dreams met with the bittersweet taste of my own insecurities. "I'm here, you know," I murmured to the night, unsure of who I was addressing. Would saying it out loud somehow reaffirm my worth, Reclaim my decision? But another part of me echoed the doubts. Would I always prioritize my needs over his? Maybe there was a balance to be found, a compromise that allowed both of us to thrive without sacrificing our own boundaries. That night, after the cake was devoured and the laughter subsided, I finally gathered the courage to open up during one of our late-night talks. "Hey, Lucas," I started carefully, "I'm really proud of you for nailing that interview. But can I be honest?" He leaned in, curious. "I still wonder about that day. I know I seemed like a jerk for not letting you use my car, and I just want you to know. It was hard for me to say no." I watched as his expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "I get it. It was a tough situation for both of us. You were looking out for yourself, and that's okay. We've all got our own battles, right?" That simple statement illuminated something vital. Self-advocacy was not only allowed but also necessary in a world where everyone tried to balance their dreams against the pressures life handed them. I smiled, a warm surge of relief washing over me. My heart felt lighter, and in that moment, the notion of friendship began to reshape. From roommates to allies, navigating an uncertain world together felt less daunting now. Maybe this chapter would take time to unfold completely, and maybe the past would echo, but beneath it all, we were learning. Not just about each other but about ourselves, about accountability, support, and the nuances of trust. It was an ongoing journey, and while I couldn't predict where it would lead us, this felt like the beginning of something beautiful. So, I took a breath, let the hope settle in, and thought maybe, just maybe, we all could find our way, one step at a time. The day I stumbled upon the life hack that changed everything for me began like any other. I was just an average guy named Jake, working a monotonous desk job in a bustling city and barely scraping by. My apartment was small, cramped, and perpetually cluttered, a chaotic reflection of my life's trajectory. Little did I know, lurking in the depths of the internet on a mundane Tuesday afternoon, I would discover something that felt almost sacred, an insider's guide to life improvement, buried within a thread titled "Ask Reddit What's a Life Hack So Good You Almost Don't Want to Share It?" As I read through the comments, most of which comprised people sharing their mediocre tips like freezing grapes for chillin' wine, I almost tuned out, but then I found it, a simple yet profound suggestion that promised to revolutionize my approach to work and life in general. Set your alarm to wake up exactly 1 hour earlier every day. Your productivity and mental clarity will skyrocket. I was doubtful at first, rolled my eyes at the idea of sacrificing an hour of sleep, but I couldn't shake the thought. After wrestling with my own frustrations about work and feeling like a ship lost at sea, I resolved to give it a shot. The first morning was an exercise in pure dread as my alarm screamed at me from across the room. Each minute of extra dark, quiet solitude felt like a battle against my will to stay under the covers, but the slight glow of a new dawn soon coaxed me into action. I brewed a pot of coffee that smelled like a promise fulfilled, sat down at my rickety kitchen table, and, for the first time in ages, opened my laptop to write. I poured out my thoughts, projects I had ideas for but never the energy to start, and plans I had shelved away like dusty books. And that first week of waking up early transformed my life. I began each day with purpose, finding hours that had previously slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. My productivity soared, and my mental health felt lighter, free from the weight of procrastination that had shackled me for years. You might say it was euphoric. I found a rhythm, a harmony with the world. I was able to exercise, meditate, read more, a zen oasis amid my chaotic existence. But as the days turned into weeks, I faced an unexpected dilemma that sent ripples through my newfound routine. My older brother, Tom, who had always been my confidant and trusted ally, doted on me during our weekly catch-ups, but recently, I noticed a growing concern etched across his face. One sunny Saturday, when we met up for coffee, he hesitated before speaking. "Jake, this is the third weekend in a row that you've been too busy for dinner with the family. Can we talk about it?" The guilt hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream that this new lifestyle was essential for my well-being, but instead, I waited through the rising disappointment in his voice. I had suddenly become this creature of habit, my joys tethered to early mornings. But in doing so, had I cut off the companionship I'd cherished with my brother? I sank into a quiet internal storm, sliding between being proud of my improvements and grappling with the social rift they caused. After days of self-reflection, I realized I needed a balance, a compromise that would allow me to retain the tranquility of my mornings while still nurturing my important relationships. I resolved to give Tom a call that evening, and after an honest conversation filled with apologies and explanations, a truce was formed. Rather than abandon my new routine, we agreed on Sunday dinners, where we could catch up without intrusion. I could have my productivity without forsaking my family, an ideal fusion of my previous and present selves. It was a delicate harmony, one that came from understanding the deeper implications of my choices, and it transformed our relationship back into its former warmth. And so, as the seasons shifted and with them, my mornings evolved into sacred rituals rather than just productivity fueled by desperation. I discovered the clarity of thought that dreams and conversations shared over meals can lead to, a tangible surplus of joy that exceeded the figurative weight in hours gained. A few weeks passed, each morning becoming a grounding part of my routine, infusing my soul with energy. One evening, I found myself sitting on my couch, looking out at the world tinted by dusk, and I reflected on how sharing my newfound life hack had cultivated a multitude of connections, unexpected friendships blossoming where I had once dwelled in solitude. Life had its way of reminding me of the interconnections we often overlook. As I sit here typing this, I wonder if sharing my hack was indeed a good idea. It blurs the line of private joy and communal upliftment. Would the power I found in those early mornings hold the same sacred space if I distributed it freely? Maybe one life hack isn't meant to be kept a secret but shared, reshaped, and transformed through the experiences of every person who dares to wake up to life's offering in their own unique way. And as I concluded my thoughts, I realized the most poignant truth of all. Sometimes a simple life hack opens the door not just to personal growth, but to richer bonds, deeper understanding, and a redefined sense of purpose, inviting us to embrace it all without reservation, life's essentials mingling with its greatest treasures. As I sat in the soft glow of the morning sun filtering through the kitchen window, I felt a sense of calm settle around me. My mind, though racing with the implications of what I had just thought, was juxtaposed against the sheer beauty of the day awakening outside. The world felt intoxicatingly fresh, a canvas waiting for the gentle strokes of life that I was slowly beginning to understand. You see, the life hack I stumbled upon didn't involve any fancy apps or complicated productivity systems but rather an uncomplicated shift in perspective. I had learned that sometimes, the most mundane ritual, waking up with intention, could, in its own quiet way, transform the trajectory of my day, my relationships, and my joy. Over the past few months, I had experimented with this idea, rising earlier than I was accustomed to, before the chaos of the world invaded my peaceful sanctuary. It began as a desperate attempt to reclaim time from my perpetual morning rush, an irritation born from the mundane trappings of life, scrolling through emails, hurried breakfasts, and the nagging sense that I was losing precious moments to start afresh. But that diligent push to wake up earlier unfurled into something far richer. As I carved out an hour before the day's demands stole my attention, I found a space to breathe. I moved in slow motion, making a warm cup of tea, journaling about my thoughts and dreams, and even meditating in the quiet embrace of my home. Each sip of that warm beverage would wrap around me like a gentle hug, reinforcing my resolve to step into the day with clarity, purpose, and an open heart. Honestly, it felt extraordinary, like I was gifted a secret chamber of time where worries could not penetrate and the weight of expectation floated away. I began to notice how this small act of self-care rippled through the hours ahead of me. I was more present during breakfast with my family, more patient with the unpredictable whims of children, and more engaged in conversations that I used to let flow past me like white noise. It was as if I had donned a new pair of glasses, sharpening details in my perspective I had long dismissed. I reveled in quiet drives to work and greeted colleagues with renewed warmth. However, with this blossoming joy emerged an unexpected hesitation. Was this secret ritual of mine meant to be shared? Would revealing my newfound treasure dilute its magic or, worse, inspire envy or misunderstanding? Caught in this internal tug-of-war, I decided to experiment subtly. Over weekends, when my husband joined me for those early hours, I invited him into my sanctuary, sharing the solace I had discovered. In those hushed moments, I saw his demeanor soften, emerging from the chaos of past weeks where work had consumed our evenings. Slowly he began to cherish those serene mornings too, our laughter dancing in the air as we shared breakfast and exchanged dreams. It was this bond, the laughter, the vulnerability, the growth, that made me wonder whether this small act of kindness and clarity could be a gift, not just for ourselves, but for others. Wanting to share this idea, I took to a popular online forum one night and posed a question in a chat titled Ask Reddit, "What's a life hack so good you almost don't want to share it?" I wrote about my morning ritual, careful to frame it not as a command or an obligation but as a suggestion for those yearning for a little space of their own. What followed was a serendipitous avalanche of responses. People poured in with stories of their own rituals, ways of reclaiming time, or tips to savor the morning before the world demanded their attention. I felt electrified with connection, strangers resonating with the quiet rebellion of choosing to wake up to love and life, not burdens. A woman wrote about her late-night tea and early morning walks, while a young man spoke of the meticulous joy he found in preparing breakfast for his family, intertwining love with fried eggs and crispy bacon. Each anecdote was like a thread stitching our various experiences into a tapestry of shared humanity. Still, the most illuminating response came from a thoughtful user whose simple message lingered in my mind: how do we awaken not just ourselves but those around us? I paused to reflect on it. This was precisely what my mornings had begun to teach me: to acquire wisdom, not just for myself but to nurture in others, to invite them into that space of calm creativity. Perhaps this life hack was never meant to be hoarded but rather to flourish in the connections it could foster. As I gradually let my secret spread, I found excitement in conversations with friends, inviting them to join me for early coffee dates, sharing my early rising practice, and encouraging them to discover their mornings anew. There was a palpable change in every one of us, an impromptu movement driven by shared mindfulness that rippled through our tight-knit circle. With laughter echoing through the early hours and stories unfolding over steaming mugs, I witnessed a blossoming camaraderie and intimacy rekindled. And so, the life hack I once hesitated to share morphed into something far grander, an experience that encouraged vulnerability, creativity, and warmth and redefined the essence of connection among ourselves and others. In this beautiful harmonic dance of shared morning moments, we wove our own intricate narrative, revealing the most poignant truth of all: sometimes secrets hold power, but freely shared wisdom holds even more. As I sit here now, bathed in the dawn's tender light, I no longer hoard the essence of my early mornings but celebrate with gratitude the community it nurtured, filled with the promise of new beginnings, like the sun that rises each day. And as I write this reflection, quietly surrendering to sleep, I know I've opened a door not just to myself but to others' unique journeys, each sunrise a reminder that some treasures are meant to be shared, forever reshaping the lives of those around us. As the first hints of daylight filtered through my window, casting soft shadows on the walls, I felt a profound tranquility settle over me, a quiet understanding of how interconnected our experiences can be. It had been months since I chose to share my secret, a life hack that had transformed my mornings and inadvertently, my relationships. It started as a small confession on a Reddit thread, tagged under Ask Reddit, where users opened up about their favorite secrets and life hacks. My comment had been simple: I wake up an hour earlier than everyone else, and it's changed my life. Of course, I hadn't anticipated the ripple effect it would create. I expected a few nods of agreement, perhaps some disbelief at how such a minor change could yield significant results. But the floodgates opened, and I was caught in a tidal wave of responses. People shared their stories of early mornings, how they found peace in a world that often felt chaotic, how sacred the stillness was compared to the rush of the day to come. At first, I felt a tinge of vulnerability, exposing my personal routine to a community of strangers. Would they understand? Was I laying claim to a secret that was too trivial to be meaningful? But the responses flooded in, each one echoing thoughts I had quietly held inside. Stories of newfound hobbies developed in those quiet hours, like painting or journaling, flourished alongside the feelings of guilt and joy many expressed about wanting more time to themselves before diving into the responsibilities of life. Slowly, I realized that my early mornings were akin to an unpolished gem, and by sharing my experience, I had opened a treasure chest full of kindness and connection. As I engaged with the community, a gentle rhythm emerged through our exchanges. People were inspired to wake earlier not just to chase dreams but to embrace silence, to savor coffee while contemplating their lives before the world's demands encroached on their time. Some created morning routines with family, turning what was once a solitary practice into a bonding experience. Reading through their accounts felt like stealing snippets of colorful lives, weaving my narrative into theirs, forming a tapestry of collective growth. I recall a comment from a woman named Sarah, who shared how incorporating this life hack reignited her marriage. They began waking up together, sharing soft conversations in the bleak morning light that often devolved into earnest laughter, ineffably transforming their relationship. There was another user, an older gentleman, who revealed he attended to his garden during those early quiet moments, nurturing life in a different sense, finding solace in the blooming flowers that awaited him as the world awoke. Yet, beneath the exchanges of inspiration lay something deeper, a shared understanding that life holds profound beauty in stillness. With each story that unfolded, I felt the walls I had unknowingly built around myself begin to fracture. I had always been one to enjoy my solitude, scavenging for pockets of time to breathe before buzzing phones and demanding schedules came crashing in. And perhaps I had feared that opening those sacred doors would lead to chaos and noise, leeching away the personal serenity I had so cherished. But as strangers opened their hearts in response to my simple revelation, I realized how wrong I had been. As the comments continued flowing in, I decided to organize an early morning meet-up in our local park. It felt like an uncharted venture, but curious optimism thrived within me. To my surprise, dozens of people showed up, some I recognized by their usernames, others who I would only know for that brief moment in time. We gathered like old friends at the edge of a sprawling green oasis, a burgeoning community nurtured by the dawn's embrace. With coffee in hand and sleepy smiles on our faces, we shared our stories, forging connections I hadn't considered possible. Every cup raised was a toast not just to transformation but to the unity of our shared humanity, scratches and bruises in varying degrees merging with triumphs that painted our lives. Days turned into weeks, and as the seasons changed, so did our meetings. Some mornings we delve into reflective mindfulness exercises or guided meditation, others were filled with laughter and shared breakfast picnics. I noticed people blooming in ways they had never anticipated. Friendships emerged, and collaborations formed outside of our gathering. One morning, as I inhaled the scent of fresh pastries baking in the sun, I marveled at how this simple life hack had reshaped not only my routine but the essence of so many lives intertwined with mine. Looking back now, those early mornings were more than just a clever trick, they were an invitation to vulnerability, revealing the subtle art of connection and the beauty of shared existence. As I finally close my eyes in surrender to sleep, I allow the memory of those gathered faces to wash over me, a gentle lullaby assuring me that life, in all its complexities, is best lived together. In the silence that follows, I reflect on the responsibilities we hold, not just to ourselves, but to each other. Some mornings I still wake to the solitude I cherish, but now, they carry the warmth of a community that blossomed from a single whisper of truth, with the promise to continually evolve. And as dawn breaks, I remember that sharing treasures can illuminate the depth of life's experiences across the vast tapestry of humanity, each thread woven intimately yet distinctively into a grand narrative of our existence. When I first moved into my college dorm, I was filled with a mix of excitement and fear. Living away from home meant newfound freedom coupled with a whole lot of responsibility, but nothing quite prepared me for becoming a reluctant pet owner. My roommate, Jamie, had a long-haired tabby cat named Oliver, a fluffy bundle of mischief that seemed to have an uncanny ability to detect when I was vulnerable, and despite my initial hesitation toward sharing my space with an animal, I found that I could tolerate Oliver's antics, until that fateful Tuesday afternoon. It had been a long day filled with back-to-back classes and a looming assignment I was struggling to tackle. I returned to our dorm, a small space cluttered with books, clothes, and the ever-present scent of takeout. The moment I settled into my bed, ready to drown out the world with some music, I heard Jamie's voice carry through the thin walls as she chatted with friends. I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm of thoughts whirling in my mind about deadlines and future plans. It wasn't long before Oliver, as if sensing my solitude, poked his head through the door, his wide yellow eyes fixed on me. "Not now, Oliver," I murmured, hoping to ward him off with my exhaustion, but, as it turns out, nothing could deter his determination. He wiggled through the slightly ajar door and hopped onto my bed, his presence filling me with a mixture of annoyance and reluctant affection. I gently shoved him off, trying to reclaim the boundaries I had set around my personal space, but I couldn't help but chuckle as he stared up at me, his ears twitching with every sound in the room. Then came the moment that seized my attention and left me questioning my sanity. Oliver, in a burst of unexpected empathy, nuzzled his face against my hand, then proceeded to bat at my fingers as if to say, "I'm really sorry for intruding, see how cute I am?" I blinked in disbelief, half wondering if I had gone mad or if this was just a cleverly plotted scheme orchestrated by my roommate. "You really think a cat can apologize?" I thought, lowering my hand hesitantly. The warmth of his fur was oddly comforting. Yet that comforting feeling quickly twisted into discomfort as Jamie burst into my room, beaming with pride for her well-behaved cat. "Do you see him apologizing?" she joked, and I couldn't help but feel a tight knot of frustration building in my chest. I had set boundaries for a reason. I needed that space to unwind, to think, and to not feel like I was babysitting a creature who had no concept of personal space. "Maybe he's learned how to be more considerate," Jamie added, but the playful tone felt dismissive of my true predicament. The following day became a cycle of Oliver seeking me out, sitting on my desk as I tried to study, performing antics to win my affection, and despite my best efforts to keep him at bay, I found myself secretly charmed. However, a tipping point came when, The next day, he curled into my lap while I was engrossed in reading. I felt warmth radiating from him, and suddenly, it felt like Oliver had transformed into an emotional semaphore, signaling that I wasn't alone despite all the chaos around me. Just as soon as the joy of that connection blossomed, the reality of our living situation crashed into it. I realized that I wasn't just fighting against a cat, I was fighting against the inklings of companionship that came with it, the roots of connection that dug deep into my reserved heart that I had not anticipated. So when Oliver came to me yet again, his head bowing slightly as he gazed with those imploring eyes as if he understood my troubles, I took a breath and softly said, "You can come in, but only this once." In that moment, there was an undeniable shift, not just between me and Oliver, but within myself as well. It felt strangely cathartic to open my door, both literally and metaphorically, allowing this little creature to occupy not just my space but also my weary heart. As days turned into weeks, I found more peace in cohabiting with Jamie and Oliver than I could have ever imagined. I started sharing moments with Oliver where his purring soothed my anxieties, moments where Jamie and I would laugh as Oliver got himself tangled in random objects in the room, and before I knew it, our space felt less like a cold dormitory and more like home. My fears of losing control over my personal space diminished, and I learned to embrace the chaos that comes with companionship. In the end, I couldn't tell if I was the asshole for trying to maintain my boundaries or if I had simply been afraid of letting someone, or something, new into my life. Perhaps some apologies, whether from a person or a cat, don't need to be spoken at all. Update: a couple of months later, Jamie and I decided to adopt a second cat. In a way, it felt as if Oliver had guided me to accept that sometimes, it's okay to let in what makes us feel alive, especially when it comes in the form of warmth, purrs, and unexpected companionship. Reflecting back on that pivotal moment with Oliver still evokes a swirl of emotions within me. I sat on my bed, surrounded by familiar comforts, the soft glow of fairy lights illuminating the corners of my room, the gentle scent of lavender wafting through the air. Everything felt just as it had for weeks, a safe, predictable cocoon. After the strange encounter with Oliver, I had decided to uphold my boundaries, uncertain yet relieved at my resolve. But as the chill of fall drifted into winter, my heart began to soften, and I noticed the joyous familiarity of my life gradually morphing into something deeper. Jamie often shared stories, enthusiastic and filled with laughter, about Oliver's antics, how he would curiously poke around the fridge or chase after the sunlight that streamed through our windows each morning. I could feel the warmth in her voice, the way Oliver brought light into our shared space, and yet, I found myself struggling with the thought of letting go of my well-guarded solitude. Days turned into weeks, and while I maintained my distance from the cat, I also began to observe him quietly from a distance. His emerald eyes held a wisdom that I could sense, almost as if he understood my hesitation but remained unbothered by it. There was something almost enchanting about how he'd stretch languidly by the warmth of the radiator, echoing the simple tranquility I craved yet feared. Slowly, I began to warm to his presence, not so much in a grand gesture, but through those small, almost negligent interactions, like when I would stand in the kitchen and catch him watching me as if waiting for an invitation into my life. It surprised me how quickly I started to miss him during those moments I chose to withdraw into my room, loathing how I had created such a divide between us with my own fears. I found myself half-consciously leaving my door ajar at night, just to catch the rhythm of his soft padding outside, an unspoken invitation for him to join me should he so choose. Finally, when Jamie suggested we adopt a second cat, a rush of emotions flared within me: fear, excitement, and a surprising sense of relief. I realized then that perhaps my self-imposed barriers had been choking me much more than any intrusion of Oliver ever could. As Jamie collected supplies and eagerly researched rescue shelters, I felt a gentle nudge toward acceptance, the idea of companionship igniting something long dormant within me. When we first met our new feline friend, a timid little bundle of gray with striking blue eyes, it felt surreal in a way that made my heart race. As Jamie gently coaxed the shy kitten forward, I felt Oliver rub against my leg, almost as if he already understood his role in this new chapter. They seemed to know what it was like to be on the fringes of solitude. Maybe, just maybe, they had both offered me a chance to be part of their world, urging me to step outside the walls I had so carefully crafted. With time and patience, the two cats became inseparable companions, and in a way, they mirrored my own journey, growth born from vulnerability. They would sprawl across my lap as I began to read or watch TV, the tiny burbles of purrs resonating with a newfound symphony of warmth. I found joy in their elegance and mischief, how they filled the spaces I had once deliberately kept empty. A few evenings later, as we settled on the couch together, I glanced at Oliver, who nestled close beside my new kitten, and it struck me clear, they offered me not just companionship but a sense of belonging, a reassurance that life was meant to be shared, even with those who might initially feel foreign. Moving forward, I learned to trust my instincts, realizing that letting in love and connection also meant unearthing parts of myself I had neglected. The warmth of their presence became my nightly solace, and as I drifted off, I understood that sometimes, the greatest apologies are those we find in the simple act of letting go, of making space for what makes us feel alive, a realization I will carry with me long into the night. As we settled into our new routine with the two cats, Oliver and our new addition, Luna, I found a sense of peace creeping into my life that I hadn't anticipated. Initially, I worried that introducing another feline into our already chaotic household might upset the delicate balance we had achieved. But Luna, with her soft black fur and mischievous eyes that sparkled with playful curiosity, helped to soothe those fears. She immediately took to Oliver, who, despite his regal demeanor, slipped into the role of doting big brother almost instinctively. Watching them wrestle and chase one another around our small apartment filled me with a joy I had almost forgotten existed. Each evening, as I snuggled under my favorite blanket, I reveled in the sound of their joyful antics, the gentle thrum of purring united in a symphony of comfort that lulled me into tranquility. Luna, with her dynamic energy, brought an unexpected vibrancy to my once quiet nights. It felt like she had unlocked something within me, something that craved interaction, warmth, and connection. I began to share my thoughts and dreams aloud, sometimes to myself while I sat on the couch, the cats curled up beside me, and I realized it wasn't just a one-sided conversation. Their feline presence felt like a mirror reflecting my own growth. I found myself questioning what other parts of my life I had unknowingly restricted with self-imposed barriers, so I began allowing friends over more often, fostering deeper relationships and inviting them into the sanctuary I had created. Jamie noticed the change, too. We laughed more, shared quiet meals where silence felt comfortable rather than suffocating. It was as if Oliver and Luna were not simply pets but ambassadors of companionship, urging me to embrace vulnerability. The change wasn't always easy. There were moments when the weight of the world would push against my chest, reminding me of past moments when I had tucked myself away. A few months in, I had what I thought was an innocuous conversation with Jamie about my feelings. I shared how I had been reflecting on why I had initially refused Oliver's well-meant apology, recounting how I now understood that love sometimes requires us to open our doors, be they metaphorical or literal, to those we fear might disturb our carefully crafted solitude. Jamie nodded thoughtfully, offering me a smile that was understanding yet tinged with sadness, and in that moment, I recognized the strength within vulnerability. It was okay to feel afraid, it was okay to be uncertain. I realize now that receiving love, whether it's from a person or a furry companion, meant stepping into the unknown, but it is also where the most profound connections could blossom. The days became less about confrontation and more about connection. About sharing our lives openly rather than behind walls built from past hurts. Then came the night that brought everything together, a night that served as a reminder of the journey I had taken since Oliver's heartfelt apology. It was a brisk winter evening, and I settled down to enjoy a quiet night with a cup of tea. The world outside was painted in white, the street lamps casting a warm glow against the snow, while inside, my two cats curled contentedly on my legs. I flipped open my journal, a ritual I had embraced as I gathered my thoughts, documenting the emotional clarity that had graced my life in recent months. Suddenly, Oliver leapt from my lap onto the desk, his little paws tapping against the pages until he settled beside me, staring up with those piercing green eyes as if he were reading my mind. It struck me that there was a profound sense of gratitude swelling within me, gratitude not just for Oliver and Luna but for the whole journey that had brought me to this moment. I leaned down, giving Oliver a gentle scratch behind the ears, and said aloud, "Thank you for teaching me how to love again." When Luna nudged her head against my hand, insisting on her share of affection, I felt an overwhelming sense of connection, a comforting reminder that sometimes the most precious breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. In the blend of their fuzzy warmth and the tranquil ambience of the room, I embraced the idea that letting go of boundaries could be liberating, not just for myself but for the new family we were building together. As I closed my journal and let the stillness envelop me, I understood that life thrives in shared warmth, and perhaps, the most genuine apologies come wrapped in the soft fur of those who teach us the value of presence, love, and belonging. I spent most of my childhood in a bubble of solitude, and as I look back now, those years feel like a different world altogether. Growing up an only child in a quiet suburban neighborhood meant that my days often floated by with just me, my thoughts, and a few loyal companions in the form of imaginary friends. It wasn't until I was in high school that I really began to notice how different I was from the other kids. While they raved about sibling rivalries and shared birthday parties, I mostly had memories of building elaborate blanket forts alone or losing myself in vast, fantastical stories spun from my overactive imagination. It felt almost like a badge of honor, until it didn't. When I met Sarah, my first real friend, in the spring of junior year, things shifted. She was boisterous and full of life, the kind of person who could spark laughter in the dullest of moments. One crisp afternoon, as we were lounging on the grass after school, she turned to me with an amused look and asked, "So, what's it like being an only child?" My cheeks flushed. I had never really thought about it before, never really questioned how it might look to others. I shrugged and joked, "I'm basically a lone wolf, thriving in my solitude," hoping my nonchalance covered my discomfort. But as our friendship deepened, I realized this perception became a topic of curious discussion. To Sarah and our circle of friends, I was the odd one out, and eventually, they began to label all my little quirks, my need for silence, my aversion to crowded places, my compulsive organizing. They teased me gently, asking if I ever felt like I was missing out on something vital by growing up without siblings, weaving a narrative that sent little ripples of discomfort through my chest. I started to examine my world more critically. Anxiety tugged at the corners of my mind like a persistent shadow. Was I really missing out? Had my quiet upbringing somehow stunted my capacity for connection? Those thoughts spiraled in me, building a tension I couldn't shake. In a moment of vulnerability, I admitted my fears about not fitting in to Sarah one day during lunch. I braced for reassurance, but all she gave me was a confused look. "It's not that serious," she said lightly, picking at her salad. "Being an only child just means you didn't have to learn how to share." It was said in jest, but the laughter that followed hung uncomfortably in the air, like the awkward silence that often enveloped me at family gatherings. The words replayed in my mind, a constant reminder of the perceived limitations my upbringing carried. It wasn't until weeks later, during a late-night conversation filled with soft whispers and secrets, that I found clarity. As the stars twinkled outside Sarah's window, we spoke about dreams, fears, and the silent battles we all faced. It was then that I realized being an only child didn't frame me in a box, it simply added to the collage of who I was becoming. I had learned independence in a way that others hadn't. I had cultivated a rich inner life that allowed me to empathize deeply, to share pieces of myself that were raw and real. By the time summer rolled around, I began to embrace my differences. I no longer felt stifled by the perception of what an only child meant. Instead, I wore it as a unique element of my identity. The teasing from friends became affectionate ribbing rather than painful reminders, and I found joy in explaining my quirks to new people I met. It was silly, almost freeing, to clarify things like my peculiar love for quiet coffee shops or my habit of organizing my bookshelves by color, little nuances that made me, me. In some ways, I imagine that everyone had their own singularities, and mine were simply born from a different start. Maybe they reinforced my strengths instead of my weaknesses. I think back on that time fondly, remembering how it shaped my adult relationships. Connecting with others became a deliberate act, a choice to share my thoughts and feelings instead of hiding behind them. I discovered that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but an invitation to deeper connections. The laughter shifted, it turned from gentle teasing to understanding camaraderie, and instead of seeing me as the solitary figure, my friends began to see the depth of my inner world. And now, as I share this story, I recognize that each uniqueness tells a larger narrative, the stories we all carry through life, boundlessly weaving with those around us. Even now, I sometimes yearn for that comforting solitude of my childhood, the solace of quiet reflection, but it was ultimately the connections I forged that opened the door to understanding myself better. It turns out, growing up alone in a crowded world taught me how to truly relate to others, to appreciate the vibrant tapestry of human experience that connects us all, and I've learned that it's not always about sharing a childhood, sometimes, it's about sharing a journey. And as for Sarah? Well, she's still my best friend, and we often reminisce about those carefree days, realizing how those silly conversations about sibling relationships sparked something profound in both of us. Update: a few months later, I saw a post on social media by Sarah asking, "What's something you learned about yourself that surprised you?" I responded, "Being an only child taught me more about connection than I ever realized." It received many comments, and people shared their own stories, forming a rich conversation. I couldn't help but smile at how the thread weaves together our different experiences into one collective narrative. Scrolling through the comments on that post, I felt a warmth swell in my chest, realizing how deeply our experiences intertwined. Each reply was a unique thread in the tapestry of human connection, beautifully illustrating how our diverse backgrounds shaped us in myriad ways. It was there, beneath the haze of glowing screens, that I caught a glimpse of a broader truth. My life had been influenced by an apparent isolation, growing up without siblings, which now seemed to blossom into an empathetic understanding of others seeking connection. Sarah and I had often joked about the quirks I exhibited, my compulsive need to organize things, my tendency to take up a lot of the conversational space, and my sometimes awkward attempts at humor that felt like they needed an audience. Yet these traits didn't just define me, they had formed bridges to my friends, especially to her. As if she sensed my wandering thoughts, Sarah texted me later that evening, "Let's grab coffee tomorrow. I feel like we both have a lot to share." Over lattes and warm croissants, we picked up right where our shared online discussions left off, transforming abstract experiences into tangible conversations loaded with laughter and revelations. Our familiarity felt like a blanket on a cold night, comforting and secure. Seeing Sarah's animated gestures as she recounted her own misadventures of self-discovery made me realize how different yet similar our paths were. She spoke of the chaos of growing up with siblings, how they often bickered yet remained inseparable, a bond forged in the fires of familial dynamics. There was an enviable freedom in her siblings' ability to spar over petty things until a simple moment of laughter could dissolve the tension in mere seconds. In our conversations, I often considered how my solitude had cultivated independence in me, yet I could feel this quiet yearning for kinship that had simmered below the surface, nurturing my desire for connection in unexpected ways. It became clear that while we had grown up in different settings, the quest for belonging was fundamentally universal. Toward the end of our coffee date, as we sipped the last dregs of our drinks, Sarah posed a question that seemed innocuous but struck a deep chord within me. "Do you think being an only child opened or closed doors for you?" I paused, stirring the remnants of milk in my cup, searching for the right words. "Both, I think. It's opened doors to understanding and appreciating the depth of relationships, but sometimes I wonder if it also closed off the type of spontaneity that siblings provide." Her eyes lit with understanding. "I get that. It's like we took two different paths through the same woods." Driving home, the afternoon sun dipped low, casting a golden glow through the trees, swirling leaves dancing in the air. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My heart swelled, no longer tethered by the solitude of my upbringing but buoyed by the connections I had forged in adulthood, the friends who accepted me for all my quirks. Reflecting on that coffee date, I realized it wasn't just about siblings or being an only child, it was about embracing the uniqueness of our individual journeys while recognizing a shared goal of longing to belong. Curiously, I decided to update my original response on Sarah's post with this realization, as I sensed it would resonate with others as well. "It's funny, isn't it?" I wrote, "how our upbringings mold us, but we realize the essence of connection lies in understanding ourselves and each other, regardless of whether we grew up alone or surrounded by siblings." As the notifications buzzed in, echoing my sentiments back at me, I could almost feel the community's collective warmth enveloping me, reminding me that whether we came from large families or were raised in the quiet corners of solitude, we each held a crucial part of the puzzle that formed our shared humanity. The realization dawned on me, the connections might just be the threads that bind us all, stitching together a narrative richer than our individual stories alone ever could, and perhaps in that, I found my own peace, nestled comfortably in a world that felt just a little bit more connected. That evening, as I put away my phone and took a moment to sit in the cozy glow of my living room, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had always loved the silence of my childhood home, filled only with my thoughts, the pages of a book turning, and the occasional laughter between my parents, a serene bubble of love and warmth that sheltered me from the outside world. But now, I found myself marveling at how that quiet solitude had not limited my ability to connect. Rather, it had nurtured a deep sense of empathy within me, one that allowed me to reach out and bridge the vastness that sometimes felt so isolating. The conversations we shared in the comment thread, that digital tapestry, reminded me of my late-night talks with Sarah, the way we dissected life's little intricacies and laughed over the absurdities we encountered. Sarah had sent me a message earlier that afternoon, suggesting we grab coffee soon to catch up, and I felt a flutter of excitement at the thought. I remembered a time when I might have hesitated, concerned that my world of one had somehow stifled my ability to engage, but not now. I wanted that connection, craved it even, like wildflowers stretching toward the sun. The next day was warm and inviting, and as I walked into the charming cafe where we had agreed to meet, I could already see her through the window, her animated hand softly punctuating her words as she spoke to someone behind the counter. It struck me then, how much she had become a part of my narrative, her own stories, filled with the noise of siblings and family dinners, weaving seamlessly into the quiet moments I had grown so accustomed to. We hugged tightly when we finally met, a rush of warmth reminding me that these moments were what I had been missing. We found a nook in the corner, the scent of freshly brewed coffee surrounding us like a comforting blanket. As we settled in, I couldn't help but reflect on the beauty of our friendship. It was a blend of her boisterous tales, filled with the chaos of siblings, balancing the stillness of my own upbringing. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, touching upon everything from our childhood moments to the recent posts we had engaged with on social media, each revelation feeling like a gentle shift in the pieces of a puzzle that was finally fitting together. As Sarah went on about her younger brother's latest antics, a sense of peace washed over me. Listening to her laugh, her eyes sparkling with details, I felt an undeniable bond forming, one that was neither defined by the number of siblings we had nor the homes we grew up in, but rather by our willingness to be present, to engage with one another's worlds. It was an understanding that transcended our physical realities and all the little insecurities that came with them. We talked about our careers, our dreams, and even our fears. I shared how I had often worried about being perceived as self-centered or introverted, but Sarah's response was a grounding reminder that traits were merely facets in a spectrum of our personalities, and it was how we chose to navigate the world that truly defined us. Later that week, sparked by our conversation, I decided to share my experience with solitude and connection on my social media. I posted a reflective piece about how growing up without siblings taught me the art of nurturing and craving connection in a world that often felt distant. To my surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. It was as if I had pulled the thread of vulnerability, and suddenly, everyone was weaving their own stories into mine. Those with siblings spoke of how they valued their relationships, while others shared the struggles of being an only child, echoing similar sentiments to what I had experienced. Each comment felt like a gentle tug at the fabric of our shared reality, a tapestry of laughter, tears, and understanding. By the end of the week, the post had sparked long threads of conversations, bringing together a community of voices, tales of connection and solitude simmering in the warm glow of shared empathy. As I tucked myself in bed that night, I reflected on how remarkable it was that our seemingly separate lives had the potential to intertwine, drawing us closer as we sought deeper connections. I felt a new chapter opening in my life, one where I could embrace both the quiet spaces I cherished and the vibrant voices of others. Perhaps this was the true gift of growing up as an only child. It didn't isolate me, it prepared me to appreciate the beauty of human connection in all its forms. Maybe, just maybe, the absence of siblings had equipped me with the ability to cultivate friendships that were, in their own right, as close as family. And with that comforting thought, I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the conversations yet to be had, and the threads of connection yet to be woven in the intricate tapestry of life. It's funny how a single moment can change everything, especially when you've poured your heart and soul into something that ultimately feels like a grand betrayal. I've been a dedicated fan of the show Through the Veil since its first season, drawn in by the intricate world building and the intricate relationships between characters. Each week, I'd gather with my small circle of friends, popcorn in hand, eagerly speculating about plot twists and character arcs. The show was more than just a pastime for us, it was a tapestry where our own experiences wove into the complex narratives playing out on our screens. But then came the final season, a season that was supposed to tie up years of storytelling in a satisfying bow. Instead, it felt like the showrunners had taken a megaphone to our cherished theories and shouted, "We don't care." I still remember the day the finale aired, a mix of excitement and dread swelling in my chest. As the hours approached, I could feel the electricity running through our group chat, with everyone sharing their thoughts, their hopes for the characters they had come to love as much as old friends. However, as the credits rolled on what was supposed to be our grand finale, I sat in stunned silence, my friends too, eyes wide. The plot had twisted in the most bewilderingly unsatisfactory manner, characters acted entirely out of character, beloved story arcs were abandoned, and the core relationships that had developed over several seasons were discarded like yesterday's news. It felt personal, like the creators had flipped the bird to all the fans who had invested emotionally and financially in the series. I spent that entire night tossing and turning in bed, the disappointment gnawing at me. Everyone else seemed to shrug it off, chalking it up to artistic freedom, but I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. I finally decided to write an impassioned letter to the network, pouring my heart out about the discontent amplifying among the fanbase, wondering if they understood the consequences of their choices. Deep down, I knew it was just a show, But as I watched my friends spark up the next day about a different series, a hollow feeling settled in. I had hoped that my voice could spark some change, or at least get a response, but instead, I got silence, and I felt simultaneously mature and ridiculous for having staked a part of my identity on a fictional narrative. The punch to the gut feeling persisted for weeks. One evening, I found myself at a local cafe tucked away from the world, nursing a cup of herbal tea, when I overheard two baristas discussing their own feelings about the episode. They were joking about how they had been let down, but their banter soon spiraled into what those characters could have done differently. I felt an unfamiliar camaraderie. Leaning over, I pitched in with my own thoughts, and soon the conversation grew like wildfire, echoing our group's frustration but freeing me from my solitude. People I had never met were validating my feelings, and it struck me that perhaps I wasn't alone in my disillusionment with the show. I posted on a fan forum, seeking a space to air my grief, and found a chorus of voices just as disappointed. We shared theories that could have salvaged it all, and gradually, the weight of disappointment began to lift as we created our own alternate endings. It became therapeutic. Instead of focusing on the betrayal, we forged new paths for the characters and laughed together about the absurdity of it all. Each day brought fresh creativity, a collection of plot lines that would ironically remind us why we loved the show in the first place. In the end, though through the veil stumbled, a community emerged, stronger than any one individual, allowing us all to heal and find joy elsewhere. Reflecting on that time, I realized that sometimes the biggest middle finger to fans is just an opportunity, a prompt to explore why those stories mattered so much and to create new worlds together in their absence. Update: a few months later, I was authentically surprised when the showrunners announced they'd be revisiting the series with a special episode based on fan submissions. My heart raced, the mixture of hope and skepticism washing over me, but this time, I approached it differently. Whatever dark corner the show might lead me down, I could, at least, revel in my creative escape. As I settled into my dimly lit living room, clutching a steaming mug of chamomile tea, I could feel a blend of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. After the initial uproar and disappointment regarding the show's abrupt end, the announcement of a special episode rekindled a flicker of the passion I once felt for the characters I had followed through thick and thin. The past months had seen me diving headfirst into fan fiction, sketching scenes, and reconstructing plots that breathed new life into the narrative universe. Each late-night writing session became a refuge, a place where my frustrations transformed into vibrant tales colored with hope and nostalgia. However, the thought of the showrunners finally acknowledging their fanbase left me second-guessing my feelings. Would they genuinely listen to the voices of those who felt overlooked, or would this be another misstep, a tempting distraction that carried the same bitter aftertaste? The day arrived when we were told to submit our ideas, and the excitement spiraled into a backdrop of anxiety. I poured out my heart into a story that melded my favorite plot lines, reuniting characters who, in my mind, deserved a second chance, a reunion that carried the weight of unfulfilled promises. I let minutia roll off my fingers, building landscapes of gripping emotion and unraveling paths that had left me bewildered. The submission deadline passed like a soothing lullaby, and as I waited, I absorbed every drop of hope and doubt that floated into my thoughts. Days blended together, every ping of my phone sent my heart racing, yet returned only updates from friends speculating about the direction of the episode. Months flew by, and at moments I found myself buried under blankets and memories, ruminating about how I might feel when the episode finally aired. Would my favorite characters retain their essence, or would they fall victim to the very fickleness of storytelling I had tried to escape? The day of the premiere arrived like a potent storm, electric and surreal. I paused for a moment at the entrance of my living room, feeling the weight of nostalgia pressing against my chest. I switched on the television, and the familiar theme song echoed, a haunting reminder of what once captivated me. As I watched, the screen danced with images I had hoped for, my submissions were woven like threads into an intricate tapestry, and I felt immersed in the warmth of a familiar hug. In a peculiar yet satisfying turn, they blended fans' narratives seamlessly with their own, elevating the original story while paying homage to what sparked the love in the first place. Each twist, every dialogue sparked joy within me, igniting childhood dreams that lingered just beneath the surface. In true storytelling fashion, the creators took risks that felt authentic, where humor intertwined with heartbreaking moments. I could feel my heart racing in tandem with the characters' journeys, their growth compelled me, igniting a fierce desire to cheer for them all over again. When the credits rolled, I finally exhaled, realizing I didn't just witness the episode, I had partaken in a celebration of community and creativity, a shared understanding that transcended mere entertainment. It was an articulation of everything I had yearned for, dreams woven collectively, which I thought might only ever exist in my notebooks. In the aftermath, I felt lighter as I tossed around ideas among my friends about potential next chapters for the characters. We laughed and critiqued, built and deconstructed narratives with warmth and intimacy, reclaiming the stories in our own ways. The series, which once felt like a betrayal, transformed into a collaborative playground, each suggestion revealing connections that knitted us closer together. As the days turned into weeks, I embraced those feelings of nostalgia without the suffocating grip of bitterness. Instead, I chose to revel in the journey. Looking back on everything, I realized how a supposed middle finger from creators spawned a rich exploration of passion, friendship, and creativity in reclaiming something profoundly shared. I realized, too, that sometimes the stories we hold dear can slip through our fingers, but are never truly lost. They morph into something new, vibrant, and alive, waiting for us to dive back in, ink new tales on blank pages, and create together, like we did. And with that realization, the darkness that once clouded my vision faded, offering a glimpse of endless possibility. Perhaps we are the architects of our stories, even if they're borrowed from the flicker of a screen or the ink of another's pen. With that realization simmering in my heart, I dove into the fan submission process with a mixture of enthusiasm and trepidation. The online forum had become a whirlwind of creativity, buzzing with ideas that both thrilled and terrified me. I spent hours reading how others interpreted the beloved characters, the settings, and the overarching themes that had captivated us, trying to find that spark within myself while grappling with the weight of expectations. Each submission echoed the pads of 1,000 eager feet, pushing against the gates of our collective nostalgia, and I found myself swept up in the wave of brainstorming sessions with my friends. We would gather in my small apartment, the dim light of string lights casting playful shadows on our faces as we combed through our notes and storyboards. We laughed, cried, and sometimes argued over character arcs and plot twists, but at the end of the night, it didn't matter who was right or wrong. We were creating together, breathing life into the void left behind by the showrunners, who had so abruptly disregarded our efforts. Eventually, I decided to submit a story that centered around a character who had long been a point of contention in the series. Once hailed as the most compelling part of the narrative, her disappearance in the latter seasons left many fans disheartened. It felt like a betrayal to cast aside such a rich and vibrant character, and so I chose to give her a tale of resilience and rediscovery, one where she stumbled upon a forgotten part of the world that held echoes of her past adventures. I could see her standing atop a cliff, reminiscent of the courage she had always shown, gazing out upon a vast horizon. Crafting her journey led me to confront my own feelings of abandonment, to explore what it meant to be loyal to something that seemed to have moved on without us. Weeks passed in a flurry of submissions from fans across the globe, a tapestry woven from the threads of different imaginations. I kept checking the updates on the show's fan page, each announcement stoking the fires of anticipation and anxiety. Finally, the moment arrived, the day they would unveil the chosen fan submissions that would shape the special episode. I sat in my living room, surrounded by crumpled pages and used coffee cups, feeling as if the walls were tightening around me as I waited for the announcement. When the clock struck noon, chills crept up my spine, the live stream began to fill my screen, the familiar logo flashing before my eyes like an old friend I had almost forgotten. As the showrunners shared their gratitude for the outpouring of creativity from fans, my heart pounded anxiously in my chest, each beat a reminder of how vulnerable this experience had made me. They began revealing the titles of the chosen stories, and each name echoed my growing hope, a series of breaths caught in my throat. My fingers tingled with disbelief when the host announced my submission, and for a moment, I felt suspended in time. The world outside faded away, the disgrace of the past replaced by a sense of belonging and validation. I had poured myself into those pages, and now, here I was, about to see my words transformed into a living, breathing segment of a universe that once seemed out of reach. The special episode was set to air a month later, but what lingered longer than the excitement was a profound shift within me. I had realized, through the act of creation, that storytelling possesses an innate power, one that connects people across their myriad experiences and fragmented relationships. I had become part of a community that thrived on shared passion, rebuilding something we loved from the ground up. The day the episode finally aired felt almost ceremonial. I gathered my friends once more, this time transforming my home into an impromptu viewing party, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of popcorn. As the episode unfolded, I watched with bated breath. The familiar score began, and with it, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. My heart swelled as my character emerged on screen, her story intertwining beautifully with the beloved narrative threads that had initially captivated us. It was as if our plans had harmonized with the creator's vision, creating something richer and deeper than any single contribution. I realized then that this moment wasn't about vindication, it was about reconciliation, not just with the creators, but with myself, my journey, and the stories I still carried within. And as I sat there, surrounded by laughter and joy streaming through every corner of my living room, it struck me that every ending leaves a space for new beginnings. The series had re-entered my life, not as a hollowed-out remnant of the past, but as a vibrant pulse that beat among us again. It was a gentle reminder that while stories may wane, their essence never truly fades. In our hands, they can always take flight once more. Update: in the weeks following the episode, an unexpected camaraderie blossomed between the fans, the showrunners, and even the actors who began to engage with us once more on social media. It felt invigorating to share in a collective appreciation, to dissect plot twists and character developments alongside those who once felt like strangers. The show had transformed into a collaborative creation, and, as someone who once felt on the outside, I finally felt at home. Together, we filled the void with renewed passion, with a promise that even when our favorite narratives twist unexpectedly, it's up to us to keep pouring our hearts into new stories, continuing the legacy of something we cherished. In the end, my biggest takeaway? That sometimes, the middle finger turns to a high five, and the stories we love are as much ours as they are the storytellers, ever evolving, ever bright.